Bom dia para você que é de bom dia, boa noite para você que é da boa noite, boa tarde se você acabou de sintonizar aí no YouTube, mais um bate-papo Mayhem, e aí você viu um nome esquisito ali, Aurum Solis, OKRC, Tarô, e o que é isso? E hoje a gente vai trazer para vocês todas essas respostas, mas antes, muito importante, você vai precisar, se você não falar inglês, você vai precisar apertar aqui legendas, e aí depois aqui nessa outra engrenagenzinha, translate to português. E aí o YouTube vai gerar para você legenda automática para você entender o que a gente está falando. And now in English. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you a lot for come talk to us. I know you're a very busy person because you take care of a lot of organizations and stuff. And it's a really honor for us to be talking to you today. So welcome, Jean-Louis de Biasi.
Thank you. A lot of pleasure to speak with Brazilian people right now. This is nice.
We have been locked down. I don't know if Victor explained to you, because this project started because we are locked down in our houses, and we usually have a meeting, a physical meeting every year here in Brazil. And this year, because of the pandemic, we are each one in our houses. So it started as interviews with our main guests, and then we expanded. And now we are reaching other countries. So how's the pandemic where you live? You live in California, right?
No, close to California, in Nevada, in the southwest of the US. And everywhere in the US, this is very bad. So the pandemic is very strong. The vaccine has started this week, but it will take months until next summer to have everyone vaccinated, at least. So we are trying to avoid it to be affected by the virus. Okay, we are doing the same as you are doing. We are working online, but we can go outside, we can hike, we can walk, that's fine. We have just to be prudent, as you in Brazil.
Great. Well, the first question that I always ask our guests is, what is your journey? And how does a normal person wakes up one day and then 30 years later, he's writing a tarot that is different from the normal tarot and coordinating several orders, magical orders, and praising to the old Greek gods. And how's that? How did that begin?
You know, this is a complicated question. This is a complicated question because when you start to do something, you don't know that you are starting something. Today, what I can say that it didn't start in this life, obviously. It started a long time before, and this life is another interesting episode in this spiritual path. So maybe you know that I was born and raised in France, in the country, southwest of France. And at a time when internet and even TV was not so present everywhere. So we had stories, ghosts, legends, and so on. So maybe it was the start of being interested by the invisible, because you have spells, you have energies everywhere. Everyone is talking about that. So maybe my curiosity started at this time when I was very, very young and associated with memories of past lives. And from this moment, I looked everywhere to go deeper in the traditions. And you said, why the Western tradition? Why not going to Tibet? Why not going to India, as everyone was doing? I practiced at this time meditation, pranayama, yoga, and everything in France when I was very young. But progressively, my understanding was if I was born in Europe, from a father coming from Italy, that means there is something to find. And maybe the most important was to focus during a time, more, I don't know for how long, but to focus on the Western tradition. And if not, what the point to be born somewhere? So the first step, yes, it was very obvious and interesting to learn the Western tradition, to discover the Western tradition. So after that, in the Western tradition, you know that there are a lot of things very different. In the Mediterranean world, you have, of course, all the ancient traditions coming from ancient Egypt, Sumer. After that, you have ancient Greece, Rome. Then in the Middle Age, Kabbalah. And after occultism, spiritism, you have all these aspects. And they have been connected and in touch with Eastern traditions. So you cannot disconnect totally the Western tradition from the Eastern tradition. They are sometimes connected. But if you go back on the time, you find ancient Egypt most of the time. And all these traditions are fascinating, very important, very powerful, but most of them have been destroyed, partly at least, between the 1st century and the 5th century. They have been destroyed by the rise of new religions. So this is not always easy, and initiatory traditions are helping for that because they maintained a real and interesting heritage. So this is something I focused on, and I continue to work on these aspects.
So, second question that I'd like to ask for the viewers in Brazil, they are not familiar with the work of Aurum Solis. So first of all, I have to ask you, what is Aurum Solis? How did it started? And how did you get into this organization?
And in Brazil, you know, we started Aurum Solis more than 10 years ago. But it has always been a very small group, and I will explain to you why. First of all, we can come back on that, and you can ask more questions, okay? It will be first an idea about the tradition, what it is, and what this tradition is about. I talked a little bit about ancient Egypt. We have to remember and to understand that ancient Egypt was mainly a very theocratic and religious country with a lot of rituals, secrets, of course. Initiations were not present. They appeared at the end of the Egyptian civilization when Greeks moved in ancient Egypt, in Egypt. So it was at the time we called the Ptolemaic period. And at the same time, you can find initiates, that means people who were looking for a deeper understanding of the universe, of life and afterlife. They started to develop something called theurgy, not magic, but theurgy. And we will do the difference between both. And they started to develop this specific path. And in few words, very few words, what means theurgy? That means using rituals, sometimes in groups, sometimes individual, to first to raise your consciousness in direction to the divine. So to raise to the divine using rituals and symbols. And as soon as you raise in this way, you attract the divine powers that are coming in your direction. So this is an ascending movement and there's a descending movement. So the point, and we will come back on that, but the point is to raise to the divine, so to come back to your original place, the place where your soul is coming from. Because we believe that we are a combination between the body and the soul, to simplify. And the soul came in this body, and the soul is supposed to come back in the afterlife to this spiritual world. And we can be trained to do this ascent and clarify our mind and master this process. So this is exactly what theurgy explained and experiment and organized a system that was able to do that. Then some initiates, continue to teach in small groups, and this lineage continued from Egypt to ancient Greece, from ancient Greece to Italy, and from Italy to North Europe. So this lineage is very clear and rooted on Hermetic texts, so texts coming from the Corpus Hermeticum. So I said that this is different than magic. Why? Because I was talking about a vertical line. You are trying to go from the world, the material world, to the spiritual world, to ascend with the techniques of rituals and so on. In magic, you are using your psychic abilities to obtain a result in this world. So suppose you want to have this work, okay, you perform a ritual to succeed and to be hired in this work. This is magic, this is not theurgy. So there is no black, no white. You use your psychic abilities, your ritual, your symbol to obtain something. And this is fine, but this is horizontal in this case. You can practice both. But if you are eager to master what will happen to you at the end of your life or on the spiritual level, you practice theurgy. And the Aurum Solis was, and that means the gold of the sun. So this is this tradition that maintain this lineage coming back to Florence, Italy, to ancient Greece, and to ancient Egypt.
And from Egypt, it came to Europe. When was the first origin of the first groups? It was the 19th century.
Yeah. If you place Greece in Europe, and this is in Europe.
Yes. I mean England.
Yeah, that's true. It was very, very early. The main episodes were in Greece, ancient Greece, really at the time of Proclus. So this is really ancient Greece. So at this time, the pagan tradition, because this is a pagan tradition, theurgic path in this way is in the Aurum Solis is coming from a pagan tradition. So it was maintained in secret because the church at this time was fighting very strongly against that. So it was in small group. And in during the Renaissance, so this is 15th century, in Florence, the last initiate from Greece came to Florence for a meeting of the church, okay? And during this time, he had contact with other people interested by this tradition. And so he created in Florence an academia, Platonic academia. And the point was externally to translate books coming from ancient Greece. So the Corpus Hermeticum, the text from Hermes, the text from Iamblichus. It was one of the founder of the theurgic path. Text coming from other sources like Proclus, another philosopher, Plato, the work of Plato, and so on. And in secret, they were meeting and performing rituals, performing and declaiming Orphic hymns, and so on. So it was really reorganized during the Renaissance in Florence, Tuscany, Italy. And after that, through contacts, and don't think about that as a very strong, organized tradition. It was more small groups in contact with other friends. So suppose you know someone, he is a friend, you said, okay, we are working secretly on this, you know that he can be trusted. So you accept him, you initiate him, and after that you create another small group, and so on. So it was not a huge, large international organization. It was just a connection between small groups, and sometimes even between just people, friends. So it was maintained like that until the 19th century, in fact, and reorganized in England, reopened during in 1897. So it was, how you can say that, a time to unveil this lineage. And when I became Grandmaster after 2000, I was Associate Grandmaster before. But when I became Grandmaster after 2000, we came back even more to the core of the tradition, to the roots of the tradition. That means to this heritage as it has been revealed during the Renaissance period. So it was a very interesting path, and we continue in the order to work as an international organization, but giving to everyone the opportunity to follow a very precise curriculum, a path, but in the same time, welcoming every initiative and involving everyone in research. So this is not just like an heritage. There is the heritage and the curriculum, and we can talk about that more precisely because there are several aspects. But in the same time, everyone is working to deepen this understanding and this heritage. So this is we like to say, a spiritual family. We have all this tradition in common, and a very strong, invisible, and in a way magical bond, really.
The rituals on the Aurum Solis are very powerful. I have participated in some, and they are really amazing. Was it the first order that you entered? Because here in Hermetismo, we used to talk about the true will, or we call in Portuguese verdadeira vontade, né? But since you talk about past life, we will talk about that a bit later. Did you already know that your mission in this life was to do that? When you first entered the order, were you drawn to the order? How did you get into the Greek context?
So first, we cannot say just something to understand. As I said, the tradition is coming from the last period of ancient Egypt. So this is a mix at this time between ancient Egypt and Greece, okay? So if you go to really the heart of the core of the tradition, this is Egyptian. But after that, yes, we use Greek. And when we will talk about the tarot, we will see that the tarot has an expression in Greek pantheon. Beside that, you talked about rituals. And what we have to understand, because it has been for me very important, really very revealing, in the Western tradition, from the time of the occultist, like let's say end of 18th century, 19th century, 20th, so 19th century, the occultists, the Parisian in Paris, in France, were focused on a kind of magic coming from Eliphas Levi, okay? And you have a lot of things. They loved coming from the Elutarck, the Martinism, and so on. They love to use a lot of candles, a lot of incense, a lot of symbols, and to boost the room with a lot of smoke to see something and to feel something. So this is occultism. Coming from them, after you have the Golden Dawn and other traditions that have been developed, and they loved to a lot of symbols and to use many things. In the Aurum Solis, our rituals are powerful for several reasons. But beside the egregore, there is one very important reason. We use simple and beautiful rituals. Every symbol we use, every magical tool is used just because it is useful. And that means we have a very simple, very important simplicity in the ritual. And this simplicity, this beauty, helps us to focus on what is essential. So to create something powerful, because you are not disturbed by things that are useless. You focus on the essential. And understanding the process of the ritual and the use of symbols, you can be more powerful. After that, there are other principles. We have a specific magical chain maintained by symbols. But this is what is very, very different beside the egregore. So in my case, I discovered the Aurum Solis through a book, because a book about the Aurum Solis was translated at the time in the 80s in France. I found the book, and mainly the book was talking about, let's say, a different version of the Golden Dawn, a simplified version of the Golden Dawn. But in the same time, it was clear that in the book, it was not just another Golden Dawn. It was something really different. So I felt that a real Hermetic tradition was hiding somewhere here. So you said in an email, it was at a time when internet was not even created. So at this time, when you hope to contact an order like that, you have not many options. You look the publisher and you send an email to the publisher, hoping that the publisher will forward the postal mail to the order. And maybe if you are lucky, the order will open the letter, will receive, then open. And if you are lucky, maybe they will answer to you. So I have been lucky, yeah, because it worked. It worked. I received an answer. I answered again. After that, I had an interview. The interview was okay. And I have been initiated maybe 2 years after the first letter or something like that. But it was at a time in France when the selection was very strong, to say the least, really. So yeah, I was lucky to succeed on that.
And you have a big work in Egyptian Freemasonry. Could you tell a bit more about this? Did it came after you joined Aurum Solis?
Yeah, so what you have to understand first is that the Aurum Solis is the spine. That means my core tradition. So everything else is different. Okay, in some cases, this is to deepen and to understand the Western tradition. Sometimes this is because someone gave me an heritage and I have to maintain it. This is a case for the Kabbalistic Order of the Rose Cross. But the Aurum Solis is different. In the case of Egyptian Freemasonry, yes, it was in the 80s, the same, and that I have been interested by Freemasonry, and I joined later on. Why? This is very easy to understand. Everyone, when you learn the Western tradition, you can see that Freemasonry is part of it. It has not been created in the past, in Egypt or Greece and so on. But if you want to understand Western tradition, there is a need to understand and to know Freemasonry from inside. That means to receive the initiations. And when you are interested by esotericism, when you are interested by Hermetism, of course, this is in Egyptian Freemasonry. Most of the people are interested by this tradition, and mostly people are more focused on Hermeticism and esotericism in Egyptian Freemasonry. So I was initiated in the ritual of Misraim, just Misraim. After that, to Memphis Misraim, and after that, I did several things. I created the first newsletter on internet, Masonic newsletter, French newsletter that was published everywhere on internet. And the Masonic organizations at the time were against internet. They didn't like that at all. But doesn't matter. We continued to publish this magazine at this time. It was a newsletter with a lot of research inside. And at one point, I have been part of, we were three to do that, to contact the Grand Orient de France to offer the ritual of Memphis Misraim in the Grand Orient de France and help the Grand Orient de France to restart Memphis Misraim. So I became Grand Officer in the Grand Orient de France, and I was in charge of reorganizing all the rituals for them. This is what I did. They were validated, and they are still using all the rituals from the first degree to the 33rd, because it was a different scale at this point. So I received it. Before that, of course, I received all the initiations of this tradition. So it was, as you can see, in parallel with the Aurum Solis, not mixed at all. Really
yes.
not.
So you have the spinal and the others. And the OKRC, the Ordo Kabbalistic Rose Cross.
Yeah. You know that in Brazil, you know more about the Amorc.
Yes.
For a simple reason, they were the first to have a lot of money and to open temples everywhere. So it helps, of course. But if you look about the creation of the Rose Cross tradition, this is coming from France. And this is coming from France in the end of the 19th century. And the Kabbalistic Order of the Rose Cross was created in 1888. So a long time, several years before the Amorc. But this tradition was at this time linked to the occultists like Papus, Stanislas de Gaeta, at one point Peladin, and so on. So you had this amorc in the United States, and all the other Rose-Cross traditions they continue to work in France. I was born in the Southwest. The Rose-Cross tradition was born and appeared in the Pyrenees, that means the south of the country, the same. After that, the tradition moved to Paris. At the time of Papus and Bricot, the Kabbalistic order of the Rose-Cross was connected to several small churches. So Gnostic Church, Gallican Church, several small churches, not as organization, but just as people. They were connecting to us and they were exchanging initiations. So from this point, and you can access the website to have more dates and to be very precise. But at one point, the order was hidden. The esoteric part, the ritual part, was hidden in a small church. And I received this tradition with the duty to keep it alive and to reopen at one point the tradition according to the original unpublished ritual. So this is what I did. And because, when you receive an heritage, when you receive something, you honor this heritage and you do your best to maintain it. And to maintain it in the spirit of the original, not trying to attract a lot of people, but trying to attract the best and honest people. Not people eager to have more diploma, more medals, and so on, but people who want to work with real, original, and powerful rituals. But in this case, the difference between the Aurum Solis, in this case, this is, how you can say that? Esoteric Christianity, really, okay? So this is esoteric Kabbalah, and at least the core is coming from, yes, close to Egypt, but in the Gnostic part, after the 5th century. So this is very different, even if this is very ancient, very old, but interesting, yes.
And what do you study at the OK, the Kabbalistic order? I heard that it was way cooler than Amorc.
What we study? We study what everyone should study in the Western tradition. What that means? That means everything related to Kabbalah without dogmatism. We study all the aspects of the Western tradition. We have practices, exercise you can do at home, but let's say, I know, because I have been, of course, in Amorc for, I did all the degrees in the 80s, so I know very well everyone and all so I can compare. And if you have monthly 5 or 6 pages, small pages in Amorc, you can have multiply by 10 the quantity of work to learn and several things. So you have a lot. But the most important, I guess, the huge difference are the rituals in what we call the chapters Rose-Cross. Because these rituals, and this is the difference when you have rituals that have never been published, these rituals are using principles at the start of the first degree, Kabbalistic principles. And they are really what you can call magic theurgy. And it works because the process is very precise. And I don't know any order that is doing that today, really in this way. So every officers, they have a specific initiation, they have a specific anointment, a specific way to increase the energy of each one. After that, each monthly meeting, everyone, they have a specific practice in the temple, not just a vowel you pronounce and you say, oh, mama, or ba, and you are good. No, a real practice, okay, that makes you different and more efficient. And the first step is more Kabbalistic. The second degree is more focused on the Renaissance, so very close to esoteric Christianity during the Renaissance. And the third degree is very close to the Gnostic tradition of the 5th century. So you are coming back like that to the roots of the Western tradition.
The next topic is about the tarot, but before I was looking and searching about the Aurum Solis, and there's a word that keep appearing that's called the Ogdati Tradition. Can you explain it to us what it is? What does it mean? Because I think it's important to understand what the Ogdatic, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
To understand the tarot, isn't it? I'm right.
More or less. No, you don't need it, but this is useful to know. Yes, you can really replace this word by Hermetism or Hermetic. What that means, the tradition has been founded by Jeuti or Thoth, the Egyptian god, who was named after Hermes, but in ancient Egypt, he was called Jeuti, you know, the ibis, the god ibis. And in the story, you have, at the creation of the world, you have 8 powers. And the world has been organized and created by 8 powers. And Jeuti is linked to these 8 powers. And this is why the city of Jeuti was called the city of the 8. So you have these powers, and these powers were after associated to the Hermetic tradition. So this is as if you said the Hermetic tradition is the tradition of the 8. You can say that in a way. So in the past, you had buildings that appeared built with 8 sides, you know, and progressively the first, and this is strange to see that, but the first churches, very old, like 1st, 2nd century, were churches with 8 sides. And after that, in Jerusalem, you have the same building with 8 sides. And after baptistery were built with 8 sides because it was associated with the original lake, purification, creation of the world. And progressively in the Renaissance in Italy, you have this baptistery in Florence that is built with 8 sides too. So this is exactly the same tradition. And you find inside the baptistery in Florence very interesting and strange pavements with the representation of the sun, with the representation of the zodiac around the sun. And progressively you see appearing an 8-pointed star, exactly the same tradition. So this is in fact a way to say that this tradition is coming from the Hermetic tradition, from the theurgic tradition, and from the 8. So ogdoadic, this is what you can find. With this idea that you have several levels, several planes, you reach the 8, and after the 8, you have the 9 when you are on the other side. And you have another text, hermetic text, that is titled From the 8 to the 9. I will share with you the link if you want to go further on that.
Well, later we will talk about the spirit word. But for now, we'll talk about the tarot. When did you came to the idea of changing the structure of the, I would call normal, but the traditional tarot?
In fact, when you learn, I learned and taught the classical Tarot de Marseille for a long time. I wrote a book about the Tarot de Marseille in French, and we will republish the book inside a course about the Tarot de Marseille. But there are several things that are wrong in the Tarot de Marseille. Let's say you have 22 letters. You have 22 major cards. You have 22 Hebrew letters. At one point, that combined both. It was not the case at the beginning, but they combined both. And they said, okay, now there is a connection between each card and each letter. And for occultists at the time of Papus, it was, or Eliphas Levi, it was fantastic, really. Because like that, you can have and use the tarot as a Kabbalist. But if you are an Hermetist, and if you are interested by astrology, there is a problem. Why? Because in the Hermetic tradition, and even for astrologists, you have 5 elements, okay, 7 planets, 12 signs, 12 zodiac signs. I said 7 planets because for the classical Greek astrology, we have just 7 planets. So we don't care about the others. So 5 elements, 7 planets, 12 signs. This is what we use in alchemy, in astrology, in Hermeticism, in theurgy, magic, and so on. The tarot, check the Tarot de Marseille. You have 3 elements. You have Aleph, Mem, Shin. You have the air, you have water, you have fire. Nothing about spirit, nothing about the earth. Why? Because why there is a disconnection like that? Because we need, and you know that in alchemy and astrology, we need the earth, we need spirit. And if we have a pentagram, we have the 5 points, we have the 4 elements and the ether and the spirit. So can you imagine a tarot that is without that? Doesn't work. And when you know that the tarot can be used for divination, yes, but the tarot is also an egregore. The tarot is an invisible power. So everyone who use a tarot for divination, you know that you have to connect to something spiritually, to this egregore, to this spirit. And when you are linked, connected to this power, you can channel this power and practice divination, okay? That means every card is connected with a spiritual and invisible power. So if you know, I give you an example. If you take the card with the shin on it, fire, you meditate or you visualize this card, you will activate the fire within you, okay? And if you visualize this card upon someone else, suppose I see someone on the screen and I visualize the lion, the card on him or her, I will send this power to you. So I can use each card as a gate to a specific power. So this is very useful. And we know the connection. Why? Because we have a text called the Sefer Yetzirah. And the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a Kabbalistic text, gives us this equivalent, saying, okay, this letter is linked to this organ of the body or to this sign and so on. So we have all these connections. So you can use the tarot in this way. But as I said, there are powers not represented. So we cannot do everything with the Tarot de Marseille. We can do a lot, but not everything. And when you go, and as I said, part of my family is from Venice, Italy, and from this part. And there is in this, you have two things in Italy. You have Tuscany and you have south of Venice. And there is at the south of Venice a very strange church. And this is a Catholic church. But when this church has been built, the guy who built that, I cannot say, he was not an initiate, but he was someone very, very involved in the Hermetic tradition. So he built a church based on the zodiac, the planet and the elements. And they said, why did you build a pagan temple? And they were very upset about that. And when you go inside this church, you have chapels, and you have one chapel with the planets, one chapel with powers of the muses, and you have the zodiac signs and so on. And you see that they are represented as really cards. And when you look to the very old first card in Italy, the design is very, very close to that. And in the same time, on the other side of the country, you have a place where they painted in color around the room paintings that represent symbolically the same thing. And you see that at this point, they use the system 5-7-12, exactly the same. And in the most ancient tarot, there is no connection at all with the Hebrew letters, nothing. They were just trying to combine with elements, planets, and signs. So during a long time in the Aurum Solis, we used the representation of the divinities coming from these places. So we experimented, and what we saw is that when you try to connect to the energy of the tarot, when you try to connect with the egregore of the tarot, this is very fast using the original ones, the pagan ones. This is faster, this is more powerful and most efficient. But the point is you can do divination, but this is less divination. This is more the way to use the powers of the cards, the powers of the tarot and the egregore of the tarot. So this is not just to find your future, this is to change your future or to work on yourself. This is not saying, okay, I can do, like astrology saying, okay, what will happen next year? Okay, but in this case, using that, you say, what could happen? Second step, how I can change that, or how I can do something. And this is why this is more useful and more powerful.
It was basically created to use the powers of tarot as a talisman or amulet or focus in our will.
Yes, because at the start, it was really like, I give you, for example, 24 pentacles, and saying if you use the 24 pentacles, you can do divination, but you can do magic too. And after that, you had cards and cards, then just 22, and later they connect with the Hebrew alphabet. And so it was not the original. So it was, yes, still linked, but less powerful. Not exactly the same energy. You go more with the Tarot de Marseille, you go more to the energy very specified of Kabbalah. The other one, you go to the root, really. So to you find the best way and the most efficient.
So we have 24 major arcana. You have the small arcana, the minor arcana too?
Yes, and in this case, this is logical. You have 4 elements, you have 12 planets, you have 12 zodiac signs. So that means you have 12 per 4. So you have a series of each sign, let's say Aries, Leo, and so on, linked to the earth element. After you have the same zodiac sign linked to the fire, the same link to, and so on. So you have the 4 elements and the series. That means you have combination. So you have, for example, Leo will be fire. It could be connected fire to fire, or fire to earth, or fire to water. So depending what you want to do, you choose the element you need. And suppose you want to do a magical circle. Okay, let's say that. How you do that? Usually, remember how looks a zodiac around a natal chart, native chart, okay, in astrology. You have the 12 signs, okay?
Yes.
So suppose you take the cards and you put the cards on the floor. So you have 12.
Yes.
After that, suppose you want to focus on the sun, on the power of the sun. So you say, okay, we are in summer, the sun is in Leo. You put the card of the Leo on the sun on the floor, and you start your ritual and your practice. So you use your tarot as really a chart you can create around you and manipulate, and you manipulate the energy, because on the cards, you have 4 magical words, names. And the names are the names of the archons linked. So 4 angelic or archangelic powers. They are in Greek. So you have on the card not just the representation, but in the same time, you have the names to pronounce and you have the letters. And I finish on that saying you have the names, you have the letters, and you have positions and movements. Because in a ritual, you should move. And the letters, Greek and Hebrew, gives you specific positions. So you have a visualization, a specific position, names to pronounce, and everything is on a card. Yeah. So it is excellent. This is a very, very useful and powerful. Yes.
Oh, this structure is amazing. I think that's the word. It is really great. It's not numbered as the normal tarot. You have just the sign and the element in the minor arcana.
Yes.
It's not numbered.
Not exactly. I don't remember. Let me see. No, I think, no, this is just linked with the 5, 7, 12. Yes, that's true. And you have the planets on each card. Yes, exactly, built. And in the center of the card, you have the representation of the Greek divinity.
Okay.
And they are painted according to the symbol linked to each one. So this is true for the elements, this is true for the planets and the divinity of the planets, and this is true for the zodiac. Yes.
I had Eduardo here say there's no numbers, it's just the planets and the elements, which I think it's great. It's one of the best designs I've ever met. Yeah. And the major arcana, how did you choose each god goes into each card?
In fact, we didn't have to choose because it was already given in the documents we had and verified in the church I was talking about in Italy. And the design is exactly the design you can find if you visit the church. In the course, because in Portuguese, we will have the course online to this tarot, the initiation to the tarot, the explanation, and so on. And there is at least 3 or 4 or 5 videos in which you can visit with me, because we were with my wife in Italy and we took this video to show you the interior of the church. And you see the representation that is exactly the same you have on the tarot for the 12 zodiac signs. For the 7 planets, this is strictly coming from the archives of the order we have in France, and from the representation in the Hermetic tradition of each planet. So let's say Helios, for example, for the sun, we have the representation of Helios, or Kronos for Saturn. So we have the representation of Kronos on Saturn. And that you can find slightly something in the Hermit and so on. So the color in the course online, we will give even the black and white, because sometimes this is very, explain to you in few words why. When you use the deck with someone, this is good to use a deck you bought, okay, online on the store, you bought the deck and you use this deck. But when you are practicing yourself, the best is not to use the same. So you have two options. You buy a second one, or you paint a specific one for you. So this is why we give a black and white version, and you can choose to paint it according the explanations as a real talisman you can use, or to have a second one, which is not. Why? Because when you use it, you place your energy in the card. So if someone is watching your card or touching the cards, this is not so good. So this is good to have 2 things, one just for you and one to use with others.
Your explanation is amazing. I am in love with this tarot. You have to bring it to Brazil.
Yeah.
We'll help you with that. Talk about this after we finish recording here. I have a question from
in France and in the US, we, my wife and I, we gave few workshops on the tarot, because you can, of course, take the course, you can learn through the book, but when you are working in a workshop, for example, I give you just an insight for that. There are practices where the group is involved. Let's say you have with you the card of the sun, another one has the card of the moon, another one has the card of Kronos. And there are several things you can do moving in the room to create not really a ritual, but to increase the energy. And you have specific designs, specific effects you can create just by the movement and the positions of everyone. So from the tarot, you go to, in a workshop, to recreate a macrocosm, in fact. And you create, during 2 days, let's say, you create a specific energy and egregore. And this is really interesting to do, really.
Yes, really, really powerful.
But this is after COVID.
I have a question from Andrea. She had a question about past lives and then input to the present life. You have explained your progress did not begin in this life. Do you believe that initiations and degrees also accompany us from one life to another life?
If I believe, can you repeat?
If you believe that initiations and degrees accompany us from one life to another life?
Yeah, in the theurgic tradition, in the Hermetic tradition, the teaching is this one. We have several lives, and we progress, we are supposed to progress from one to the other. Okay. And we have one major obstacle. The major obstacle is that we don't remember. We lost the memory. So as we lost the memory, we do the same mistakes several times. The point is, first, to not do the mistakes again. Second, to keep our memory intact and to decide yourself where to go after. So the point of a theurgic path like the Aurum Solis is to learn how to do that. How you can keep your memory intact when you will die, and how to decide where to come back and when. Like that, it will be helpful, I guess, because this is the only thing that is important. Everything is useful, like magic, tarot, and so on. But what you really want is to not disappear when you will die. So this is exactly what we want, not to suffer and not to disappear. And the theurgic path is exactly teaching that. And this is the teaching of this tradition, and the techniques are linked to that, really.
Igor has asked you, do you know Umbanda here in Brazil, in Candomblé? Are you familiar with these religions?
Yeah, I saw at least 2 or 3 times in Brazil. Yeah. One close to Rio de Janeiro, another one in the north. And I practiced and taught shamanism, and I still continue. And shamanism is very, very close to, at least very close to Candomblé. Yeah. And I like it.
I asked if in terms of theurgy, is there a difference to do the rituals in Hebrew or in Greek or in Portuguese or in French? Do you feel that there are differences when you spoke the ancient language? They are more effective or no?
Yes. You have two different things to see. First, the text you are reading. This is, I think, better to use your native language. For me, I have sometimes trouble because now I live in the US, so I can do it in French and English. But the sacred words or few sentences you have to use in the original language of the tradition. So if we are in the Kabbalistic order of the Rose Cross, the sacred language, let's say that, is mainly Hebrew. In the Aurum Solis, we are using sometimes, rarely, but sometimes Hebrew. After we are using Greek, then Egyptian. So we can use these languages, but mainly in the Aurum Solis, this is Greek for several years. And in some rituals, you have Latin, and some rituals, you have even ancient Egyptian within the ritual. But for the individual practice, from the start, this is a few sentences in Latin and Greek and your own language. But you do not replace the sacred names by their translation. You use their sacred names, of course, because they are powerful, and we are teaching how to pronounce them. Doesn't matter if this is in Hebrew, Greek, or Egyptian. We explain how to pronounce. But beside that, you have also sounds, and sometimes you have vowels like O, A, U, I, but you have specific ways to pronounce that, several levels of sounds. And this is important to receive the transmission and to be able to use them and to use these powers. And as you said in your question previously, is it the same thing to pronounce in Hebrew, Greek, or Latin, and so on? No, absolutely not. because you connect to a different egregor. If you use the Greek, you connect with the egregor of the masters who used Greek in the past. The same for Hebrew, the same for Egyptian. So the energy you receive and the energy you create is different, really different, and more luminous, I can say.
Right. So we are almost getting to the end of the recording, but I have to ask you, I have asked this to a lot of religious leaders and philosophers now. What do you think happens when we die?
So you know, the answer is easy and complicated.
Is it?
Why? Because I am part of an initiatory order, initiatory tradition. So there are secrets we don't want to share. Okay. But what I can say, of course, the basic, and I explained that in the book about the Aurum Solis, saying that if you work correctly, if you have been trained a little bit, when you die, your soul is disconnected from the body, and you go on the other side for a certain time. If you have been trained properly, you will stay awake, you will stay in full conscious, and staying aware like that, you spend certain amount of time on the other side before to come back. And you come back in another body. As I said, the point is to be able to control everything. Okay, to know where you go, to know where you come back, and to plan everything. And this is what you do. So you go out, you come back, you go out, you come back, and you continue like that. But this is not like in India. This is not like the Eastern tradition. This is not random. You work, and if you work well, you progress every time. If you don't do any work, you don't progress. And you can even sometimes go back. You don't go back in an animal, you stay human, but you come back stupid. That's it. Useless and stupid if you are lucky.
Okay. And could you give an advice to the new people that are beginning to deal with magic and studying and dealing in the occult world?
Yeah, this is a very, very good question, really. I wrote several blogs about it because internet is wonderful. We can do that today because of internet. But in the same time, internet is horrible because we believe that we know everything. We believe that we can do and reinvent, recreate everything. We don't need masters, we don't need schools, we don't need anything. We have everything on internet. So first, no, we do not have everything. There are still secrets in some initiatory orders. So that are given just to some people, not to everyone. After that, we need schools because we need people who practiced a very long time. We need an experience, really. And we need people who have experience. After that, we need to be integrated, associated to a clear and powerful egregor. If we are not in one, we are alone. If we do a mistake, we are alone. If we stay alone. And if this is good, this is good. But if this is bad, this is very bad. And when you are associated to an egregor in a school, a real initiatory order, you are protected by the egregor. That means you can do a mistake, and this is less a problem because you are still protected when you are associated in a real magical chain. So this is why internet is really good for that and for the research and for the work. But for an inner work, you need the real contact. You need the real teaching. You need someone who is following you. You need a real, and there are a lot of initiatory orders that are not really serious. That means they don't select people. And they welcome everyone. This is good. But you have crazy people. You have people that are unbalanced. And I can tell you how we select. This is very simple. For us, we select people mainly on honesty, on stability, and people who are not trying to prove something, to manifest their ego, to have a new medal, and so on. So if we have someone who is honest, who is clear, who wants really to work seriously in a very real spiritual family, welcome. Doesn't matter if what he's doing in the work, in the job, doesn't matter. Everyone is important and interesting and so on. But if someone is just looking for medals or just for, improving your ego and not humble and so on, out. Really. And he will go nowhere, really.
It's been a great advice that. And for ending this interview, how can we find more about the tarot and the orders? I know you have given me the links, so the links will be down here in the description, but this is also a podcast, so I need you to say.
So you have the links and you can use the links, and you can go on my website, let's say, so debiasi.org, O-R-G, and from our website, you will find the other links. You will find the way. You can go on Facebook and type my name, and you will find the contact as a friend or the page. And so go on Facebook, type my name, and you will find also. And after that, from one, you go to the other, and it will be fast because internet is fast.
Well, it has been great. Thank you so much for this conversation. I'll just say goodbye to the people here. And if you want to say some ending words to say goodbye to our listeners, and then we will open the cameras and talk to you. So, muito obrigado por vocês que acompanharam a gente até agora. Depois a gente vai fechar aqui para conversar um pouquinho mais com ele. Mas não esquece, segue o canal, dá like e dá uma olhada, porque a gente tem mais de 120 entrevistas assim para você acompanhar. Então a gente se vê aí no próximo Bate-Papo Mayhem.